All right. Seems like we're back. Yeah, that's good. So the Jets, they've been a disappointment almost the whole season. You talk about this offense, they're getting used to Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers should be a guy where he's a veteran presence in any locker room. He should be able to lead by example and go out on the field week in and week out and give them a chance of winning. But it seems like this year the only thing that's holding the Jets together is their defense. They held Bo Nix to 60 yards, and yet again the defense did its job there. When you look at it, Bo Nix having the 60 yards really put the Jets in that position to win. But they couldn't get anything on the offensive side of the ball. In the first half, both teams were pathetic on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't have a yard, the Jets, until I want to say it was very close to the end of the first half. They had a touchdown, and it looked like things were starting to get better. But once the second half started, it just looked like the first half all over again for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers couldn't get anything done on the field. You had the kicker miss a kick later on. And when a kicker can't even get the job done there, there's no chance of winning. Because I saw the Giants lose a game because they didn't have a kicker. It's a very disappointing start for the Jets because they were supposed to be at the top of the AFC East. They got very lucky last night with the Bills getting annihilated by the Ravens. And when this type of stuff is happening for the Jets, you have to think things have to turn around quickly, and if they don't, it's going to be a huge issue going forward. On the other side of New York, the Giants played Thursday night. The conditions weren't great. The conditions weren't great yesterday for the Jets either. So football is a game where it's played no matter what, in any type of weather. You have to be ready for that. Your game plan has to revolve around whatever the weather entails. And when the Giants did not have a run game Thursday, that put them out of winning the game. And the fact the Cowboys couldn't come out on top, they couldn't take advantage of the fact the Giants could not get anything going on the run, and which was very disappointing to me because the the Cowboys have not had a good defense in general, but when you talk about the rush as the primary factor there, they really haven't had anything going for them on their rush defense. And when Devin Singletary could not get anything done, they should have switched to a little bit of a primary focus on Daniel Jones. Have Daniel Jones do his thing. Have Daniel Jones get the ball moving on his legs. But this loss, yet again, was not on Daniel Jones. I'd say the only loss you could pin on Daniel Jones this year was week one. Week one was the only week where Daniel Jones did not have over a 60% completion percentage. It was the only week where I would say they were still seeing what Malik Neighbors could do. But the main thing that stuck out to me, and I rewatched the game too, to refresh my memory a little bit, was the officiating. There was a face mask call on Daniel Bellinger early in the game. The Giants were driving down the field. It looked like they were going to score a touchdown no matter what. They were clicking on all cylinders. Malik Neighbors had just had a 50-yard catch. Daniel Jones was getting the job done that drive. And when they called the face mask on Daniel Bellinger, it stopped all sort of momentum they had. When officiating steps into a game like that and they decide what is happening and they decide the basically they decided that the Cowboys were going to win that game no matter what. Daniel Bellinger did not grab the face mask of the Cowboys player. It was actually the opposite. The Cowboys player had grabbed Daniel Bellinger's face mask and stopped all sort of momentum the Giants had that drive. And I would say they didn't get that momentum back the whole game. Slayton, well, outside of Malik Neighbors now, you I want to shift a little bit to outside of Daniel Jones, outside of the officiating, start putting the blame on some of the players. When Malik Neighbors was ruled out of the game with a concussion in the fourth quarter, and Daniel Jones had to pivot to his other receivers on the field, Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson being the two main receivers there. They weren't able to get the job done. You had Darius Slayton drop the ball twice, and you had Wan'Dale Robinson let a pass go through his hands. When you cannot rely on your slot receiver and you can not rely on your option 2 or 3 in a play, it really limits what you can do. So that's why when people say if the Giants had another quarterback, I saw something that said if you insert Josh Allen into this offense, the Giants would be in that Super Bowl bubble. I don't think that's the case because Daniel Jones did everything right. Daniel Jones was the field commander. He was setting the tone for the game. His weapons outside of Malik Neighbors could not get it done. And that is very disappointing to me because I thought the biggest issue the Giants would have this year would not be the other weapons they have on offense, but it would solely rely on what Daniel Jones can do. And the script this year for the Giants has not been that at all. It's been what can his option 2 and 3 do? What can they do on the ground without Saquon Barkley? And the answer has been nothing. Outside of Malik Neighbors, they have been able to get nothing done on offense. And if the Giants don't figure that out, they have a bigger issue than Daniel Jones. They have a bigger issue than quarterback, which is kind of silly to say that quarterback here isn't the biggest issue because quarterback is the most important position on the field. It is the position that should determine winning or losing. It's that case for the Jets too. Aaron Rodgers should be the deciding factor there. And I think when you look at the Jets, Aaron Rodgers has been the deciding factor. But when you look at the Giants, that's not the case. So I think the Giants need to take a deep dive into what they have and what they can do better and how these slot receivers, how these other receivers in plays can help out Daniel Jones, can help out Malik Neighbors in taking some of the pressure off of them and getting things done in different ways. When you talk about the NFC East as a whole, it's been disappointing. And if the Giants were able to pull out a win on Thursday, despite everything that went wrong for them, they would be right at the top of the NFC East as the team that is in first is the Washington Commanders at 3-1. The Washington Commanders have been the team where everything has gone right. Everything has gone right for them. Jaden Daniels has looked incredible. I saw a clip from Hard Knocks where Joe Shine talked about Jaden Daniels and how they had no chance of trading up for him. And if the Giants did have Jaden Daniels, I think it would be a little bit more of a conversation of the Giants being in that NFC East title range or even Super Bowl bubble. And when the Washington Commanders don't have many weapons, I'd say outside of Brian Robinson, really outside of Brian Robinson and Jaden Daniels, they really haven't gotten much done, but they've been the team that's figuring out ways to win, and I think that's what's making them different than all the teams in the NFC East. They are finding those ways to win. They're finding ways to compete, and the Giants just haven't done that this year. And all the other teams in the NFC East haven't done that. The Eagles haven't been able to capitalize on weaker teams. They haven't been able to compete with teams that should be at their level or even just barely above their level. The Cowboys haven't been competing really at all. That's one thing where people are saying, "Oh, the Giants held themselves together against a Cowboys team that should be much better than them." I think people are gonna quickly realize the Cowboys aren't very good this year. They don't have many weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb, and when someone does find a way to lock up CeeDee Lamb, it's gonna be very hard for them to find ways to win. And overall, the NFC East as a whole should be wide open, but it seems like Washington's gonna run away with it if things don't change quickly. Shifting a little bit, I think I'm gonna touch on the Yankees now. The Yankees had a very disappointing last homestand, but I don't think it's anything to really be worried about. They weren't putting out full strength lineups that last week outside of the games against the Orioles. And yes, they did drop game 1 and 2, but the Orioles were doing everything possible for them to somehow get that scenario where they could win the AL East. And they obviously couldn't because once the Yankees had their ace on the mound, they're basically guaranteed win. The Orioles had no chance. The Orioles even had Corbin Burns that game, which should be their guaranteed win. But when the Yankees are clicking at all cylinders, when they have a guy like Gleyber Torres at the top of the lineup who is hitting at a level where we haven't seen him really hit since early last year, maybe even as far back as 2018. Gleyber Torres has been one of the best second basemen in the league. That being said, there aren't many good second basemen in the league. It is a very thin position there where I think you're either average or just below average. There's very few second basemen that are above average or elite. I'd say really the only elite second baseman in the league are Jose Altuve and maybe Nico Horner on the Cubs. But it's it's a very weak position there. But to have a guy like Gleyber Torres at second base, it has to maybe make the Yankees think a little bit. Should they retain him? Should they try and keep him on a team friendly contract? I think this October is going to be the make or break for him. And I think it's going to be the deciding factor for the Yankees on if they keep him or not. I think the only thing there is to be worried about for the Yankees is that pitching staff. I saw Luis Hill give up 4 earned runs in 4 innings pitched on Saturday, and that was Clark Schmidt yesterday, and Luis Hill gave up 6 earned runs in 5 innings pitched on Saturday. Those are going to be your game 3 starters. It's either going to be Hill or Schmidt with Nestor out. And with those 2 starters there in that 3, I don't think there's either one of those starters is gonna give you a great chance to win. So, when it does get to game 3 and when their turn does come in the rotation, probably I wanna say it comes again in game 6 in a 7-game series or yeah, game 6 in a 7-game series. It's gonna be a telling factor because a lot of times you wanna get that series done in 6 games. You don't wanna go to that 7th game. You wanna preserve your ace to pitch game 1 of a World Series. You want that lock to win. And with a no clear game 3 starter for them, it's gonna be hard to put a series away in 6 games. And that's the one thing I'm worried about as a Yankees fan is what are the Yankees gonna do outside of Cole and Rodon? Are they gonna do a Heel and Schmidt game 3? Are they gonna have one go out, start the game, and the other one piggyback off of them? Because to me, I think the big issues that stem from them are that first turn around the lineup, not the second or third, which usually is what you see in a starter. You usually see a starter start to struggle once their second or third turn comes around in the lineup they're facing. And to see them struggle in the first turn, I don't know if I would go to Schmidt or Heel after one of them were to start a game. Because, like I said, they're struggling that first turn. If they were struggling After that first turn of the lineup, it would be a different discussion because then you could easily have one come in and piggyback off the other. And it would be a simple answer, but nothing simple in baseball. Another topic for the Yankees is Anthony Rizzo did go down with an injury on Saturday. He did break 2 fingers, or he broke in between the fingers. It is a little iffy there. I don't know what they're saying with Anthony Rizzo. What's the case? They said that they haven't completely ruled him out for the division series, but what it's looking like is he's not gonna be there, so you have to look at your options 2 or 3. The depth is really gonna be tested there at first base, and that's been a question mark all season. You had DJ LeMahieu as a black hole in that lineup at first base for a lot of the season. Will they turn to him again as they say he's getting healthy? Or are they gonna turn to someone like Oswaldo Cabrera who might not have the best defense there, but might have the best bat? Ben Rice is another guy where he came up earlier in the season towards the All-Star break, and he tore it up. But after that first 2 weeks and that adjustment period where pitchers saw what he had, saw what he could do, and saw his weaknesses, he really started to struggle. But once Ben Rice was sent back down to the minors after Anthony Rizzo came back, Ben Rice seemed to be killing that pitching down there. So it's kind of a gray area. Is he ready? Is he not? I don't know. Ben Rice is a huge question mark there, but I have seen guys in the playoffs that do get hot and they do get called up towards the end of the season and do make an impact in a postseason roster. So I think their best option is with Ben Rice because at least he is a natural first baseman. We know he can make the plays there and we know his bat is there, but we don't quite know if he's gonna be able to use that bat in the postseason with these competitive pitchers, with the only 3 starters, the 3 best starters that a team has is gonna be what you face. Is Ben Rice gonna be able to hit that pitching? It's a huge question mark there, but it is their best option because Oswaldo Cabrera, we don't know what his glove is gonna entail, and if he were to make a crucial error late in the game, what could happen? That could be the difference in a game in the postseason. And I don't think the Yankees wanna take that risk. I don't think they are going to take that risk. That's why I think Ben Rice is gonna be the first baseman there. And listen, you stick Ben Rice at the 8 or 9 slot in a lineup, it's not gonna hurt you. So I think you go with the guy that's the natural first baseman there. You have a guy that has a very big upside in his bat for that lineup. That's your best option there, and I really don't think that Anthony Rizzo being hurt should hold them back in the postseason at all. So move on again. So the Knicks, I mentioned last week, they had a little bit of a dilemma at the center position because Mitchell Robinson got hurt, and obviously Isaiah Hartenstein had left in free agency. So they were kinda left with a hole there. Were they gonna have to play Julius Randle at center? Were they gonna play Precious Achiuwa at center? They had no true center. Well, they went out and solved that this past week. It was on Friday, I wanna say. They went out and made that trade. They got Karl Anthony Towns from the Timberwolves. Now, they gave up a lot. They gave up Julius Randle, who was kind of that 1B in New York. He was the guy outside of Brunson that would get things done. They also gave up Dante DiVincenzo, who had a career year last year. We saw him shoot from an absurd rate at the three-point line last year. We saw him save a postseason game multiple times last year. We saw the chemistry that him, Brunson, and Hart had. And with the addition of Mikal Bridges, who also played in Villanova, it was going to be very exciting to see those 4 play on the same court. Now we're not going to be able to see that because obviously DiVincenzo was included in that Karl Anthony Towns deal. And it was a little disappointing, but word is that DiVincenzo was not very happy with the role he had on the team because he was going to be coming off the bench. And if you're a basketball fan, if you're a Knicks fan especially, you know how Tom Thibodeau uses his bench. He does not use it very often. He probably uses it for 5 minutes a game. And DiVincenzo did not like the idea of only being in a game for 5 to 10 minutes a game. And so trading him, yes, it may seem like a shock at first because of the chemistry of those four: Bridges, Brunson, Hart, and DiVincenzo. It did seem like an absurd idea to trade one of them. It really isn't. Because one or two, because Hart was probably going to be on the bench too. Um, when you talk about that, one of them's going to be on the bench. We weren't going to be able to see that full chemistry in swing anyway. So trading one of them probably was the best move for the Knicks, especially when you do not have a center. They acquired probably the best center they've had since Patrick Ewing. I think the only downside on KAT, Karl Anthony Towns, is that he's a little soft. But in today's NBA, I don't think there's many tough players left. When you look at the calls that are being made, when you look at a guy like Joel Embiid, who's won an MVP last year, and no, 2 years ago, you look at a guy like Joel Embiid, he's not the toughest player out there. He really does strive off of the fouls that are called. He is a free throw merchant. And so the toughness factor doesn't really bother me at all, especially the fact that we have a coach like Tom Thibodeau who does bring out the tough side in all of his players. And Karl Anthony Towns, his talent's going to outweigh the fact that he's a little soft. He shoots 40% from the three. We had a guy like Mitchell Robinson at center last year who can't even shoot a free throw, let alone a three-pointer. So to have a guy like him in this lineup does, I think, make the Knicks a much better team. Yes, you lost DiVincenzo. Yes, you lost Julius Randle, but you gained more than that. You gained a star center, which the Knicks have not had in decades. ESPN ranked him as the 5th power forward. Yes, his natural position is power forward, and once Mitchell Robinson does come back, he will go back to power forward, and Josh Hart will move to the bench. But obviously, we don't know when Mitchell Robinson's going to come back. But once Mitchell Robinson does come back, it's probably going to be in time for the playoffs. That playoff lineup of Anunoby, of Brunson, of Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, it's going to be one to reckon with. It puts them right up there with the Boston Celtics. They answered the question that Knicks fans were asking almost the next day. They showed Knicks fans that, yes, the plan is to win, and we are not going to just put in any player into the lineup just because we don't want to lose a little bit of chemistry in Dante DiVincenzo. We don't want to lose a guy in Julius Randle who, yes, he brought a lot to the Knicks a few years ago when he came here in free agency. A lot of Knicks fans were devastated, including myself, when Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant went across town to the Brooklyn Nets. Julius Randle gave us that chance to compete, and he showed us just a year after he was signed that the Knicks, yes, could win without a star. They could make the playoffs without a star. But now we have Jalen Brunson. And the Knicks want to show Jalen Brunson, after he signed that team-friendly contract, that they want to win with him. And he is the star in New York. So they went out and they got Karl Anthony Towns, and they made the right decision. To say the Knicks didn't make the right decision by doing this is a crazy idea because center is one of the most important positions on the court. And the fact that the Knicks now have solved that puts them at the top echelon of teams. So another team that plays at the Garden, the New York Rangers, they do start in about a week. They did have a little bit of a concerning tidbit of news here that Jimmy Vesey went down on the ice at practice yesterday. Listen, the Rangers, they need to get the best that they can out of every single player because of the cap constraints of the NHL and the lack of depth and the aging players they have. The fact that Jimmy Vesey went down is very concerning to me because that fourth line is very weak. It has a lot of question marks. Who's even going to be on that fourth line? Quite honestly, I don't know. They need to get a lot out of a few players we haven't seen much from, especially Capo Caco, who was a second overall pick a few years ago, and we haven't seen second overall play from Capo Caco. We saw Alexis Lafreniere take the step last year to a good player, but I still wouldn't say he's an elite player. I think we need to see Alexis Lafreniere become an elite player if the Rangers want to make a run at the Cup this year. I think that we need to see a lot from Philip Hedl, who didn't play last year. We need to see a lot from the young guys because that's going to be the future we have with this team with a lot of aging players like Mika Zibanejad, like Artemi Panarin, like Jacob Trouba, Chris Kreider. These guys are all getting older. They make a lot of money. So you need to get a lot out of the guys that don't make much. And when you see even a small piece like Jimmy Vesey go down, it's a huge concern to a team like that because who else do they have? This is supposed to be a Stanley Cup contender. This is supposed to be a team with no question marks. But it seems like it's a team filled with question marks. And it's very disappointing to a very loyal fan base who has not seen a Stanley Cup championship since 1994. New York is one of the biggest sports markets. We see the Knicks go out there and being run to the point where they are going to compete. That is their goal. I don't think the Rangers are being run like that. They did try and trade Jacob Trouba to kind of get them out of that cap trouble they're in, to make cap space for other players so that their window does open up a little bit more. But Jacob Trouba was selfish, and he's supposed to be the captain of this team. And when you don't have good leadership from your captain, it stems from the top down. And it's going to be very interesting to me to see how this energy of Jacob Trouba refusing a trade affects the play on the ice this year. The window's closing. It's closing fast. And if they don't get it done this year, and if those question marks do not turn into answers, it's going to be a rebuild all over again like a few years ago after they had made the Cup in 2014. And then they traded almost everyone away just a few years later. It's a similar situation here where if this year is not the year, everything's going to come down. They're going to trade everyone. It's going to be another rough few years in New York if the Rangers do not have the answers to their questions. Now, I wanted to finish the show off with the Mets today, but I do have one more subject to talk about before I do move on to the Mets. It's a little bit of college football here. So I did mention on last week's show that Navy was 3-0, Army was 3-0, and if they had gone 4-0, it would be the first time since 1945 where they had both went 4-0. Navy and Army both won this week. Not only did they win, they won big. Navy won 41-18 and Army won 42-14. And like I said last week, it's going to be very interesting to see if they keep winning, if they are going to be catapulted into that college football playoff picture. It's going to come down to those few games where they play against ranked teams. Navy plays Notre Dame at the end of October. To me, that's the biggest game on Navy's schedule this year. It is a rivalry game, so it does happen quite often. But if Navy can beat Notre Dame, it's going to be very, very interesting to see if they are in the college football rankings. They're in a very weak conference like the AAC, where they have to win those ranked games to be in the top 5 of conference champions, to be in the top 4 of conference champions, sorry. Unlike a team like Alabama, who we saw yesterday, played Georgia, 2 nights ago, played Georgia. Alabama went out there and they shocked the number 1 ranked or the number 2 ranked team, Georgia. And Alabama has beaten Georgia 3 times in the past 3 years, which is crazy because Georgia has only lost 4 games in their past few seasons. And Alabama has won 3 of them. It was great to see for an area like that, especially after the hurricane that just hit down there, to see Alabama pull out that win because I know a lot of those areas are being affected by the hurricane right now. Obviously, Florida being the big place that's being affected by that. But yeah, that was very good to see. So now I'm gonna move on to the last segment, which is the Mets. The Mets play elimination baseball today against the Braves. The Braves were supposed to play the Braves a few days ago, but obviously because of the hurricane, they had to postpone those 2 games. And now they have to play a doubleheader today. Whatever team wins game 1 is probably going to throw game 2. That's probably how it's going to go. So I did not see the pitchers that were lined up for game 1 and game 2, but I think the Braves have Sale for game 2. So I don't know if the Braves are even going to try and win game 1, if they're just going to save everything for game 2, or they're going to see if they can win game 1 without Sale. Because if they can win game 1 without Chris Sale, that means that they could save Chris Sale for tomorrow when they play in the National League Wildcard Series. The Mets are going to have to use some of their best pitchers. They're going to have to use Luis Severino. They're going to have to use Sean Manaea. And for a team that's going to have to play a playoff series tomorrow, game 1 is the most important game. It sets the tone for the whole series. And to not have your best pitcher or even your second best pitcher pitch game 1 is very disappointing. And I think the Braves chose the right strategy here. Put out a starter that is not going to be your game 1 starter. Might not even be your game 2 or game 3 starter. Probably not even in the playoff rotation for them. See if they can win. Because if they can win, they have all their resources for game 1. They have all their resources to set the tone. I think when you talk about these 2 games, though, you have to think about the Arizona Diamondbacks, who were one of the hottest teams coming out of the All-Star break. I thought they were even gonna be in contention for the NL West title. They made the World Series last year, and now their fate is determined today. One of the teams has to get swept today if Arizona is gonna make the playoffs. And for a team to get swept today would mean that the other team doesn't make the playoffs too, which I really do not see happening. Because, like I said, once a team wins game one, they are not going to try in game two of that doubleheader because it ultimately means nothing for them. And to say that this is a successful season for the Mets is an abysmal take because the Mets have one of the highest payrolls in all of baseball. And to only win not even 90 games and to be that last spot in the playoffs is not good enough for a roster that's constructed with that much money. It just isn't. The Mets are filled with question marks. Their bullpen, yes, it was reinforced at the trade deadline, but it still has not been playing as a top echelon team in baseball. They have their superstar in Francisco Lindor. They have a good first baseman in Pete Alonso, who, let's be honest, might not be here next year. The Mets have had a disappointing season. And to think a successful season would just be to finish at 500 if you're a Mets fan is embarrassing because the Mets have one of the highest payrolls in baseball. The Braves don't even come close to their payroll. And the Braves fans are saying this is a disappointing season for them because, yes, their playoff seeding, their playoff spot is determined on today. It's determined on their last 2 games played of the season. It should be the same conversation for Mets fans. It should not be a double standard that because one team in Atlanta, yes, on paper has a better roster construction for less money. It shouldn't just be disappointing for Atlanta. You have to think it's disappointing for the Mets too. Because it was disappointing for the Yankees last year too, when the Yankees didn't make the playoffs and the Yankees just finished above 500. That roster was constructed with less money. When I see a team like the Oakland Athletics who are moving because they didn't have faith in their fans, and I saw all of their fans come out and sell out the Oakland Coliseum for their last game and be devastated by their team moving. If Oakland would have even half of the resources the Mets have, it would be interesting to see where Oakland would be because they are a smarter run baseball organization than the New York Mets. The Mets are a very poorly run organization. And that's why, to me, that this season is a disappointment for them, no matter what. Because let's be honest, they even win one game today. How far are they going to make it in the playoffs? They're not going to make it far. They might not make it past the wild card round. Most likely not. But when we talk about the Braves make it past this game, these games today, and they make it to the wild card round. If they lose in the wild card, it's also a disappointment for them. We can't be having this double standard in baseball where because one team, yes, at the start of the season may not have been projected for that many wins. Listen, Fangraphs projected the Yankees to win 71 games this year. So if we're going solely off projections, the Yankees had a successful season, but it wasn't because they didn't win a World Series. And that is the fans' goal. The fans have to have a higher standard. The fans set the standard for what they want their team to be. And the fact that Mets fans are sitting here and calling this a successful season, it just bewilders me. Because if I was in Queens and if I was a Mets fan, I would be disappointed because they put all of these resources into the team a few years ago, and the resources are still there. They were expected to win off the gate. And now that they had a disappointing season last year, it just makes this season a success. It just isn't right to me. It doesn't sit right. So no matter what the Mets do today, no matter what the Braves do today, I don't think the Braves can do anything right today for their fan base, which is the right standard for them to be held to. But for the Mets, if the Mets make it past today to success to their fans, that's just not right. There has to be a higher standard as a baseball fan. And that's why I love being a Yankee fan, because our fans hold the team to such a high standard. If the Yankees had a season like the Mets and it was determined by the final 2 games, there would be chaos in the Bronx. And I think that's how it should be. Because like I said, the sports fans, the fans, they set the tone for what they want their team to do. It's not the owners, it's not the players, it's not the manager, it's not the general manager, it's the fans. The fans put that energy onto all of them, and they said it. So if I'm a Mets fan, you win today, great. You're 1-0 today. Guess what? You have to go 1-0 tomorrow. You have to keep winning. Because to think that you just win today and it's an automatic success is not the right energy to have as a fan. You have to keep holding them to higher standards. Think about how you hold yourself every day. You always want to do better. You have to hold your sports teams to the same energy that you have. So I think that's all I have for today. It's going to be very interesting to see. We have elimination baseball today. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all next week.